Hello all. So, I want to start this video off by telling you guys a story.
In the summer of 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte crossed the Niemen River in what is today Poland, and he invaded the Russian Empire. Now, he did this in order to solidify his continental system, and this would thus hopefully pressure the British out of the war. The underprepared and under-equipped Russian armies quickly routed against their superior French coalition foes. But a combination of the weather, miscalculation of Russian resistance, and most of all poor logistics rendered the campaign unsustainable. The invasion retreated, and a few years later coalition forces, headed by the Russians and the Prussians, would then enter Paris and force the would-be French emperor to abdicate. In the summer of 1941, more than a century later, Hitler would launch his own invasion of the Soviet Union. Now, he did this to solidify his continent-spanning German Empire and expand Lebensraum under his Nazi ideology. The under-equipped and underprepared Soviet armies quickly routed against the superior German Axis foes, but a combination of bad weather, miscalculation of the Russian resistance, and, again, poor logistics had rendered the campaign unsustainable. The invasion retreated, and a few years later, Soviet forces would enter Berlin and force Hitler to commit suicide.
So, if you're a history student like I am, that story is probably one that you've heard maybe thousands, if not millions, of times. And it's not really a good story anymore. It's overused, it's told too much, it's pretty much boring at this point, but it is a somewhat important story for our purposes today. You might have heard this one before. History is about recognizing the mistakes of our past. It's a pretty common teacher's response for when some school kid asks something like, dude, why do we even gotta care about stuff that's happened already? I mean, there's more to caring about history than that, but... See, there's nothing bad about being into something just out of pure interest. It can be a hobby, something people just do because they like it. They're good at it, and it makes them feel alive. It's also just a good habit to learn about other people's cultures and their customs. It makes you more likable and hopefully less of a racist. With that aside, though, yeah, the learning from mistakes thing is a pretty common philosophical assertion made about the learning of history. It is one of the biggest rationales for people like me even existing. In fact, if you've ever been in a history classroom at any grade level, it was probably the justification that your teacher gave you whenever somebody questioned the point of the subject. I mean, it's literally written right there in the curriculum. Legally, as a student, you have to know that, or your teacher is doing a bad job. But like Napoleon and Hitler, I'm here today to tell you that no, we haven't learned anything. In fact, one might even argue that human society and the way in which it consumes information around it hasn't changed all that much at all. And one is me. I'm the one arguing that. Yes, that's the point of the video. And look, I'm not just talking about some Vietnam War era stuff either. I think it's pretty obvious to everybody at this point that us as a species have not learned anything since then. No, I'm talking about 1,000 years in the past. Yeah, so I'm gonna be analyzing a play made in ancient Athens, and I will compare it to our modern world because I have nothing better to do. So, in true essay writing format, I have decided to structure this video in a peel structure. So, point, evidence, explanation, and linking. But there's no linking because the video ends there. There's no extra bit. It's just one point that I'm making. And I'm doing this because my grade 7 English teacher told me that this is the best way to make a point. So... I just ended a sentence with the word so, and grammatically this doesn't make me feel very good, but I'll have to start another one with the same word. So, why these two? Why compare a 1,000-year-old play with a somewhat culturally significant comedy made about America and the War on Terror released in 2004? Well, at first glance, these two cultural properties shouldn't really have anything in common. They're made by two completely different demographics of people, and these two demographics didn't even really know of each other's existence when they made these things. But with that said though, these two are sort of about the same thing somehow, and I think that's very interesting. It says something about us as human beings, something visceral that concept says about war, and how we managed to justify the legal killing of other people when otherwise we would view such a thing as disgusting or cruel or morally corrupt. For context, since I don't really expect any of you to know the background of this obscure ancient Athenian play, I will try to summarize it to the best of my abilities. And with these things of summary and history, I will probably put some of my own interpretations and inputs in it. So, if you care enough, you should go read it for yourself. I'll put a link in the description or somewhere. Our play starts with a woman named Athra, and she is the mother of Theseus, an ancient Athenian hero and king of legend. They're at the temple of Demeter, the patron goddess of agriculture, and she's there on behalf of the mothers of the mercenaries from Argos, who lost their sons in a failed assault against the city-state of Thebes. Their deaths alone, however, are not the reason for their sadness. No. You see, the king of Thebes is angry or something and doesn't allow the Argyles to retrieve their bodies, which is against ancient Greek burial customs. That's what's devastating the hearts of these mothers. So, as Theseus' mom, and she is prompted by the king of Argos, Athra urges her son to go to Thebes and return the bodies to Athens so they can perform the proper burial rites. Theseus counters though by saying, "Why Athens? This war that the Argyles were involved in did not include us. Would it not be more appropriate to ask some other polity?" The king, however, has his own counterpoint. Athens is awesome, he says, and Sparta is evil and should not be allowed to gain more influence. All the other nations of Hellenica are also too weak or compromised. It is Athens, he elaborates, that has a moral imperative and responsibility to intervene in this war on the behalf of the Argyles. Theseus then grumbles a bit about how much Athens doesn't want to intervene on another polity's behalf, but ultimately he acquiesces out of some sort of moral obligation. He then sets off on his journey, and he says he's aiming to negotiate, but he's also more than willing to use violence to accomplish his goals. On his way, Theseus encounters a herald sent by the king of Thebes, and he sort of gets into a tussle of words with this herald. "Just leave it alone," says the herald. "The Argyles messed up. Let us deal with them and don't bother thrusting yourself into a war." Theseus, however, has his own counterpoint that might sound similar to some of us in the 21st century. He says, "No, dude, it's not about Athens, Argos, or even Thebes. It's about morals and goodness. By not allowing the Argyle mercenaries a proper burial, the Thebans are violating some universally recognized values of decency, which all Hellenics seem to agree on. Some sort of rules-based international order, if you will. And thus, this justifies Athenian military intervention." There are some parts between this that aren't too relevant to our analysis, so I'll have to skip it, but Theseus essentially takes an army to Thebes, and he retrieves the bodies. But when they take the corpses back to Athens, the corpses are of course disgusting and rotten. Their mothers cry in terror at seeing their children's decomposed conditions, and Theseus then washes the bodies to show his piety, performing finally the proper burial rites. So that's kinda sad, right? The heroics are basically from then on done. Nothing else happens in the play of import. What Theseus set out to do, and what the titular suppliant women wanted from him, has been accomplished. With that said though, nobody here ends the play happy, now do they? And that's probably what makes this play have an air of melancholy around it. Imagine, you as the mother get to see your child's rotting corpse one last time before they're sent forever from this earth. And that's your prize for sitting through Theseus' journey. It's a tragedy by dictionary definition. Well, let's now look at what difference it makes when we take a comedic angle to this whole thing. What if we make a commentary on war by satirizing and making fun of it? A piece of film perhaps that doesn't talk about grieving moms, but about dicks and balls and other stuff relating to male genitalia. Team America World Police is a satirical comedy made by comedians Matt Stone and Trey Parker of South Park fame, and they probably made this thing in 2003 and released it in 2004. It's kind of about the war on terror, but more broadly, you can apply pretty much all of the anxieties of American foreign policy at the time towards the film.
Terrorists on screen!
As opposed to Suppliant Women, the movie has this crass and goofy tone. It's on the other side of the spectrum in that regard. and it follows Gary Johnson instead of Theseus, who is your archetypical pretty boy actor recruited by American intelligence to thwart some terror threat. I'll spare you that lengthy of an explanation like I just did, and I'll talk about Team America as I move through my points here, mainly because the movie itself is just way more accessible for you guys, and I got tired of drawing. So if you wanted me to summarize the movie in the way I just did, I guess I'm sorry. But also fuck off. I don't owe you anything. I don't know what you want from me. Sorry, I didn't mean that. That's really mean. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I swear. I'm gonna articulate again now what my overarching point is. That at the center of these two pieces of media, which both try to offer commentary on war, there still exists a pro-war message, like a war Twinkie, I guess. These movies, they sort of don this anti-war veneer, but it's like that thing people do when they offer advice and then they cap it off with, "But I don't really know, man. Yeah, I don't know," to try to avoid the responsibility of possibly ruining your life. And to make my arguments here more succinct and intelligible, I will break this section into clearly signposted subtopics. Speaking of which, the first one will be... I'm not going to take for granted that everybody in the audience knows what I'm talking about. And to give an introduction to this part, I'll put the shoe on the other foot for a second and try to understand how these two pieces of media could be, and often enough are simply taken at face value, to be anti-war satire. At their cores, even though one is a tragedy and the other one is a comedy, Team America and Suppliant Women are somewhat superficially similar in their plot structure and overall themes. I mean, just look at our main characters. They are both arguably personifications of their respective polities, Athens and the US, and they reluctantly accept a mission in which they are tasked with intervening in a foreign country to host some indignity or evil threatening the state of the world. For Theseus, it's the Theban king, and for Gary, it's this puppet of Kim Jong-Il. There's even these remarkably similar bits in both texts in which our protagonist laments about the responsibility that the world has thrusted upon them. They speak pretty explicitly in both of their respective plays that they hate it and they don't even really want to be a part of it.
Because you're the one with the power
Well,
to
I don't want the fucking power! I don't want the guilt, I don't want the shame, and I don't want the responsibility!
However, as much as they complain and claim to be hesitant, the plot, as it drags on, demonstrates to us that bad things are happening under our heroes. Team America razes Cairo and they destroy Paris, but I guess you can maybe interpret that as a positive because French people die. Theseus goes out and he starts another war, probably without the approval of the Athenian people. More people die, and the bodies he finally retrieves grants nobody respite. He even has this line where he arguably calls the Athenian demos idiots who will just approve of anything he does after the fact. Now, if your only contact with these two pieces of media is what I've just described to you, you might think that, yeah, the message of Suppliant Women and Team America are pretty clear. They are obviously satires of war which show that nobody gets any good out of it, and the people who fight it, even though they often think themselves as righteous, cause more harm than good. But look, the problem I have with these two is that in their heart of hearts, both really refuse to engage with war in any real way. And as a result, they come up with these conclusions that end up justifying bad things. Their overall message isn't war bad and shouldn't happen. Weirdly enough, and even though it doesn't really feel right, their thesis is that war is bad, but I don't really care. We gotta do it. War is supposed to be happening, guys. So now that we've established why these two aren't really anti-war plays, no, we haven't. That's what I'm gonna do in the latter part of the video. So now that we've established why people seem to think these two properties are anti-war, I can finally start to tell you why I'm right. Why these people, they're all wrong. They have bad opinions and mine is really good. And my best point to back this fact up is... Okay, so imagine for a second that without any context, I just ended the video right after my explanation of both Team America and Suppliant Women. That would be pretty jarring, wouldn't it? I mean, here I am, I'm setting up a lengthy pile of what seems to be evidence to prime a point, but there wasn't a point. I half-heartedly threw at you the proof, and I didn't do anything afterwards. That's essentially what these texts are doing here. They are setting something up, and then they do a 360, and then start walking towards a weird moral. See, Team America and Suppliant Women do not only share in their similar themes and plot structures, they were also sort of created in these weirdly similar cultural atmospheres. The former was made in 2003 and released in 2004. Its creation coincides with the media circus that justified the invasion of Iraq, and its release was smack dab in the middle of the war itself. This was the height of American global power. The Soviet Union, the nation's arch nemesis for half a century now, had collapsed under its own weight about 10 years prior, and future threats, such as a resurgent People's Republic of China or an increasingly belligerent Russian Federation, just haven't yet materialized then. Francis Fukuyama's infamous thesis on the power of liberal democracy was still somewhat in the cultural zeitgeist, and to the layman, Francis must have had his points. It was a time in which America attempted to justify its immense cultural, economic, and military imperialism in an epoch that many thought would be the end of history. The importance of foreign interference could no longer just be simply underscored by the fear of communism. No, America had to once again find a ideological rationale which would justify and advocate for the benevolence and goodness of the US Army and its actions. The movie was obviously created with an American audience in mind, and it's a hallmark of a very specific time in the US's recent history. Though when and how it was created exactly is unclear, Suppliant Women was first known to have premiered in the city of Athens during 423 BC. It was the middle of the Peloponnesian War, a conflict between Athens and Sparta mainly, that started after Athens devastated Megara, a Spartan ally with extensive economic sanctions. Both of these texts then were created in a climate which demanded some talk of a war. A war that, in the US and I'd imagine in Athens, wasn't very clear why they were fighting it. So, with that in mind, I think these films then are extra worthy of criticism and analysis for their pro-war or anti-war messagings. They don't exist in these vacuums where nothing ever happens and nothing ever will. They exist in these epochs of war itself, where there is a war happening and that war needs justification or, well, unjustification. And though the plots, individual segments, jokes, and dialogue of these two texts look and sound subversive, they ultimately just sort of toe the party line. Sure, Team America blows up Paris and they kill a bunch of French people. Sure, they flatten Cairo and they kill a bunch of Egyptians, but Team America are not the villains of this story, and that's really where the movie's thesis starts falling apart. Remember when I told you that despite the protagonist's seeming reluctance, they still allow themselves to do horrible crap? Well, that sort of ties in here. Look, you can mouth off as much as you want about how sad you are that you've done this and how much you loathe the responsibility, but it doesn't matter. What you did is what you have done. If I apologetically blow up your house, I still blew up your house. That doesn't make the act of blowing up your house any less reprehensible. The film, however, seemingly doesn't recognize this. Team America are bumbling, incompetent, and violent baboons, and they sing songs about McDonald's and Levi's. But they're still a force for good. The arch enemy is Kim Jong-Il, and he is a very real threat in this movie. He plants bombs across the globe to kill people, to sow fear and create civil conflict. He probably literally wants to end the world. When you juxtapose things like this, everything that Team America does now seems inconsequential. Sure, they are crass American exceptionalists who kill a bunch of people with collateral damage, but whatever puppet Kim Jong-Il will do or has done is worse by comparison. And since they're trying to put a stop to him, they must be the good guys, no matter what. That is the logical line that this movie must follow to make sense. The Hollywood liberals who oppose the war and whatever Team America is doing are showing the movie to be effeminate and just as superficial as Team America. They actively work together with the North Koreans to try to make the world a worse place. I mean, you just listen to the speech that Gary makes at the end of the film and you understand what's happening here.
We're dicks! We're reckless, arrogant, stupid dicks! And the Film Actors Guild are pussies. And Kim Jong-Il is an asshole. Pussies don't like dicks, because pussies get fucked by dicks. But dicks also fuck assholes. Assholes who just want to shit on everything. Pussies may think they can deal with assholes their way, but the only thing that can fuck an asshole is a dick.
If that wasn't clear enough for you, Gary is essentially saying here that yeah, the Hollywood liberals don't like them, but in the end, they are stopping a great evil, an evil that outweighs whatever they're doing. It's a good thing that Team America basically doesn't do anything else messed up past the halfway point of the movie, or it might become really obvious that the film is undermining its own point. I mean, the whole joke for the Film Actors Guild is that their name is a stand-in for a homophobic slur, so I don't think Matt Stone and Trey Parker were trying to be very nice to them when they wrote that. I don't think their anti-war angle here is very endorsed. Suppliant Women as well runs with this theme. Theseus spends a good amount of time telling the king of Argos how dumb it was for him to lose the battle, how much Athens shouldn't be involved. In the end though, Theseus does get involved. He does exactly what the king of Argos wanted him to do, and he causes the deaths of even more people by doing it. He helps this king who loans out mercenaries into a foreign civil dispute, and the play somehow concludes that it is the king of Thebes who is being unreasonable here. The badness that is implied by this war is not the dead people, it's not the suffering, it's the fact that the Thebans are rude and didn't allow the Argyles to retrieve their bodies. That's right, the most powerful city-state in the Aegean in our reality, which at this point controlled half of Hellenica, is militarily invading you because you have bad morals. Athenian military intervention is not bad. What Theseus does is not condemned. The most the play tries to do with the whole war bad angle is by half-heartedly saying that the Argyles made a mistake by losing in the first place. So, at their crux, both texts ultimately end up justifying the wars they represent, not just by not acknowledging their harm to other humans. No, it's actively worse. They admit that war kills people, they look at that point right in its eyes, and then they just say, lol, whatever. The US and Athens are forces for good in the world, and you should just let them do their job when foreigners need intervening. So, I'm sure after listening to all of that, you are now completely convinced by my points. My erudite and well-educated opinion, which holds great power over the world. But, when you think about it, and I certainly became aware of this as I was recording the video, everything I yapped about just stands on a pillar of assumption, an assumption that I made, of my own correctness. Here's the thing though, what if they're right, you know? What if both of these cultural productions are right in what they're saying? What if yes, the ends do justify the means in their specific contexts? What am I gonna say then? Well, that brings me to my next point. Yeah, well, sorry if this comes as a surprise for you, but they're not right. They're just not. The primary assertion made by these two pieces of media is based completely on false pretenses. I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't know that already. I mean, just think again about the contexts in which these two were made, and the weirdness of watching them contemporarily without any hint of irony or criticism. Look, I'll talk about Team America first because you already probably know what I'm gonna say. By 2004, during the film's release, it had already become very apparent that the WMD cause cited by the Bush administration was phony. The movie had premiered approximately 2.5 months after the Senate report on Iraqi WMD intelligence had been released to the public, and in my country, it was first brought over in December of that same year, so half a year later after the report. And yes, WMDs are at the center of the film's conflict, and as I've stated earlier, without them as the world-destroying threat, the entire rationale for Team America being the good guys starts falling apart. The WMDs used by the terrorists in the movie are explicitly given out by Kim Jong-Il in North Korea, but in real life, that never happened. North Korea might have supplied small arms and equipment to a myriad of strange and dubious forces across the world, but WMDs were not one of them. It didn't happen. We choose to root for Team America as viewers because they are the lesser of two evils. And how American is that? Aside from all of that, just historically speaking, of course the US doesn't care about keeping the world safe or peaceful, whatever. What is this amateur hour? Like read a book. Whilst the film depicts the harm that American foreign intervention does as bumbling tomfoolery, That's just not the case. And why would it be the case, right? Why is there a need for us to act like one of the most sophisticated militaries and bureaucracies in the world just does this crap on accident? No, it knows what it's doing. Dick Cheney didn't wake up on the wrong side of the bed and decide to invade a foreign nation. The United States has actively plunged nations into civil war. It's installed brutal dictators. It's facilitated genocides. You don't do these things by mistake. You do these things because you act in self-interest and you don't care about the well-being of others. Team America blows up Paris and they blow up Cairo and they swear a lot and they talk about dick and balls, but ultimately they don't do any of that. They don't commit genocide or topple democratically elected governments. And that's such a vital criticism that needs to be made when talking about US foreign intervention, isn't it? Yet it's completely absent in the film. Filling its void is nothing, and that's why it's really hard to read this movie as anything other than an endorsement of war. Coming back to the comparison, Euripides operates in the same philosophical manner when he writes Suppliant Women. Theseus invades Thebes to return the bodies of the Argyles mercenaries, and like the threat of Kim Jong-Il in Team America, that fact alone is the entire moral hinge on which the play rests upon. Without it, Theseus has no ground to stand on. But again, like the US, why does Athens even care? The play fares better than the film in that the burial customs which it describes are actually real, but again, hate to break it to you, but Athens is far from the peace-loving nation that Theseus explains it to be. In the play, when he is arguing with the Theban emissary, Theseus says this: "There is nothing more hostile to a city than a tyrant. In the first place, there are no common laws in such a city, and one man keeping the law in his own hands, he holds sway. This is unjust. Freedom consists in this: who has a good proposal and wants to set it before the city? What is fairer for a city than this?" It's important that he makes the Theban emissary hear this. He is here as a representation of Thebes, but he also serves as everything that Athens and the Athenian audience which would have seen this play know to be bad. Athens' moral goodness then is further pinned on it being a democratic polis, and though this theme is not as explicitly stated in Team America, the reality of our world and the subliminal messaging within the film already makes it clear to us that, well, both Athens and America essentially have the same rationale for what they're doing. They are morally just, and they love democracy. However, that's just not true, for Athens at least. For the US, I guess you can figure that out for yourself. Part of the reason the Peloponnesian War started at all was because of the influence of the Delian League, a machination of Athenian imperialism and colonial power. Athens used this arrangement to collect tribute, it conscripted soldiers, and it controlled the polities around them. They destroyed the insubordinate city of Erythrae and installed a pro-Athenian government there, using a military government to keep it in power. And with that, both of these works now actively ignore what makes US and Athenian interventionism so bad and criticizable. Instead, it replaces it with a straw man that is more palatable to the audience. They are criticisms of war in the same way that White Man's Burden is a criticism of colonialism. So, why did I just tell you all that? Why did I just spend like the better half of an hour explaining to you my thoughts on the anti-war messagings of this goofy 2000s movie and this goofy negative 2000s play? What does it all mean? See, therein kind of lies the problem. It doesn't mean anything. You guys remember my Napoleonic War and World War II story at the beginning of the video? Well, I sort of buried the thread on that. I'm using it as a dramatic literary device, if you will. I concealed its true meaning in order to supply a more satisfactory ending. Why do you think Hitler invaded Russia despite Napoleon doing the same thing 120 years or so prior and failing in almost exact same ways? I know that's a bit of an exaggeration. Things obviously didn't go the exact same ways, but still, it's hard not to see the parallels between not just the two men, but also the course of the two invasions as well. Well, Hitler probably didn't think of Napoleon's invasion all that much when he conceived, planned, and then carried out his own. I mean, why would he, right? The former took place over a century ago. Technology, weapons, the way people fight, the way people think of fighting, it's all changed since then. It's sort of dumb to base your entire plan off of that over a century ago. But from our perspective, as people living in the future judging two dead guys, Their situations seem remarkably similar, and that's sort of what I'm trying to do here. Nothing much has changed, as I've hopefully just demonstrated. Both Suppliant Women and Team America say essentially nothing except, hey, war needs to happen sometimes, and when we think it needs to happen, we should go and start one. I want you to think about ancient Greece, ancient Athens, and what you picture when you do that thinking. There's probably people living in togas, people living lives of agriculture among small towns, hamlets, villages, and occasionally larger city states. It was an experimental time where we started thinking about ideas of democracy and representation, but we still glorified war, violence, and pederasty. It's a very different time from the one we are living in right now. I mean, just look at this stock image that comes up when I Google the word ancient. That ought to show you what is ancient. Isn't it weird then that in more than 2,000 years, these two pieces of media talking about war, two completely different wars fought in different ways, are still hammering on the same milquetoast conclusion about what's wrong and what's right? As an aside, I want to talk a bit about something that's not entirely relevant to this part of the video. See, when I was making this video, YouTube recommended me a video essay by the channel Casey Jarms. In terms of its topic matter, it's sort of similar to my own video, which is probably why I came across it in the first place. Now, I'll admit, I didn't watch this video, partly because I didn't want any of his criticisms to influence my scripting, and also I just wasn't feeling a 2.5-hour video essay that day. What I did though was I went down into the comments section, and there I found something that was quite interesting to me. Here you can find not just a small supply of people essentially echoing the same argument. The movie is funny, you twat, and you're dumb and not funny, and the movie is funny and it's satirical and stuff. One of the best satire movies ever. You'd be a great character if they do another. Quick, someone get this man a safe space and soy latte. Now, even at first glance, you can already sort of find faults within these comments. Firstly, they're just very mean. Like, my guy had an opinion and he made a multi-hour long video about it. But the most you can muster afterwards is just to say that he drinks soy latte. It's not very nice in my opinion. Secondly, and more importantly for myself, is just what are you even talking about? What exactly do they think Matt Stone and Trey Parker are satirizing here? Does biting satire just mean using goofy puppet characters to make a movie? Does it mean you express an opinion while saying stuff about dick and balls in the same sentence? No, I would argue that no, that's not what it is. This might come as a shock for you, but I don't like war. I'm not a big fan of it. Typically, I don't imagine myself enjoying getting killed with a gun, so I'd rather avoid causing situations where that may happen quite commonly. What satire then am I supposed to get from this movie? What stupidity has been ridiculed through Matt Stone and Trey Parker's exaggeration and irony? What is even ironic about this movie? There's no answer to the rhetorical questions I just asked because I already knew they had no answers. That's why they're rhetorical. Matt and Trey just think me and people like me are dumb and stupid and that they're right. Look, I think Team America World Police is funny. I've watched the movie many times as a teenager because I thought it was funny.
Okay, I'll show you, Hans. You ready? Stand ready to your left. Read them all. Good. There you go, Hans Briggs! How you like that, you fucking cocksucker?
And that lends credit to Matt and Trey as comedians, but not as moral compasses. They call me dumb in a funny way, but they still like it when people die. And look, when they made Team America World Police, they probably weren't thinking about the Suppliant Women or the Peloponnesian War. On the other hand, when Euripides wrote The Suppliant Women, he probably wasn't thinking about this goofy puppet movie or the War on Terror. So then, why do these things have such similar messages? I'm not gonna follow up on that point with any authority. I can't, I'm not an expert, but here's my layman's opinion anyways. My way of interpreting why these two became so similar in the end. It's cause we don't care. Hitler probably knew that Napoleon didn't succeed in his invasion. It's a pretty well-known historical fact. But that's just that. Napoleon didn't succeed, but Hitler didn't use Napoleon's lack of success to inform his own actions. There are some sure results of invading Russia, some 100%. That the weather there is cold, that the people there probably don't like being invaded, and that logistics in a large country is hard to do. There is also some 100%, some certainties about all wars, that people die in them. This is a common running thread, but we don't learn anything from this thread because we don't want to. We don't realize that there's anything to be learned there at all. I was originally going to script this part, but I found it very hard to put into words the exact things I wanted to say about this. It's just, I think that us as people can understand that when we see a dead guy, a guy dead on the floor, a corpse, that's bad. You know, that means something bad. Corpses are bad. I think we as a species understand that instinctively. But when you say that that corpse is meant to be there, when you say that that corpse needs to be there, when you tell people that people, this group of people from this country need to become corpses, it becomes a lot harder for us to distinguish between, well, is that corpse on the floor still bad? We're sort of afraid of looking at that concept in the eye. But we still know subliminally that there's something to be said there. That's why we create war media. It's just, I'd imagine when Matt Stone and Trey Parker created Team America World Police, they wanted to be funny, first and foremost. However, it's hard to grapple funny with that, with saying something about a war that is currently happening. And that's why I think a lot of people tend to only remember the first half of this film. It's simply more practical, it's more utilitarian, it's better for Matt Stone and Trey Parker as comedians to talk about the war in a satirical manner. But when they loop back around to being these hawks in support of the Bush administration, it just becomes very weird. But yeah, that's just my opinion on the matter. I'm not really sure though. But yeah, that's the video. Bye all.